Oh my gosh, there's 15 minutes before class, and this joker over here gives me this piece of crap repo. So let's fix it. All right. So you have your element in a subdirectory, which makes total sense because of the way that we built it. However, if you're up a level, when you run the OpenWC command, it actually writes into an existing Git repository. So let me very quickly refactor this. I've got to use it this way. You would have hit the GitHub GUI system instead. Oh my gosh. Where the hell is that, Brian? All right. GTO Pro, right? I don't go into PS2 card to clone a Git repo. When you put it there, also as a pro tip, generally speaking, when your repo is named like web component and it's not even spelled right, one, super difficult to figure out what it's going to be, right? So I can open everything here. Easy way to dramatically improve everything is get everything out of that PSU-card up a level, right? And it's in version control already. So even if I just get at all this, everything in the right place. I have a sticky E key on this keyboard, so I'm not going to actually be able to spell things correctly. So you have to run the command from package.json, right? Package.json has to be wherever you are. So I'm going to run yarn install just because I use yarn, but you can use npm for this because it's not that stupid view repo that like half the class failed with. Resolves files, whatever. Let's fix everything. Now, which mode do you want to go with? Do you want to go with hard mode or easy mode?
Whichever one's efficient.
Well, no, okay, so efficient is hard mode. I'm not going to review your code until I actually have fixed everything.
Oh, my code is perfect.
You sure it is? Okay. So while this is running, this is a fun, I don't know. I'm told this is fun. Okay. So we've got cards, we've got CSS. I don't give a crap about that. Render, clone the card. You've got header, but you don't actually use that. You've also got styles down here, but there's styles above. Right. So should probably have those styles out of there. And as a general pro tip to everyone else in class watching this at a later point in time, if you reach out and ask for help, then I end up doing the work for you at times, as long as you demonstrated that you attempted to do something. So you had, what the hell tag in here? What is it, a head tag? You can't have that in there. The head tag goes in the top of the document. It just defines, there's body, and above that is head. Well, I don't know where that came from, but it said it right there. It also was open but not closed.
Yeah.
All right, so let's throw these styles in here so that they're all in one place. Clone. Now, what was your real issue as opposed to what I'm torching right now? Like this has spacing, that has spacing. This needs to not have spacing because space is driving me nuts.
Oh, it's all over the place.
Space. You also use camel case here as opposed to hyphen case, which makes sense because IDs can't have that. But it's like, I give a crap about card? Like, I don't need this to be card title. You're not actually targeting card title in any way, unless you were with the button previously, right? You're trying to change title.
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't port over any of the JavaScript, right?
Haven't yet. I can do it now, but
no, because I can't. So if we want to clone the card, now we're going to refactor all of this next week anyway, because what I'm about to show is not correct. It will be correct in this instance, but next week we'll do it in a more accurate way. So, what do I want to name? What do we want to name a clone function? Probably clone card, right? And it's got an event handler. Okay, and it's going to query select the card container. Yep, this is the thing that is the card. Absolutely. Detail. All right, that's summary attached to that div. Okay, so that closes those divs. Let's line those up at this level, though. We've got the card and the buttons. All right, did you see how that just like wrote all the code accurately and I didn't have to write anything? It's kind of fun. Now, this does this.shadowroot.appendChild, which implies it's just going to kind of toss it in there arbitrarily. So when we're in web components, shadow root refers to everything within this render method, effectively. It's scoped, so instead of you calling like document.getElementById, fill in the blank, you do like this.shadowroot.querySelector, and you're selecting within just this thing we're in. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is this context, right? And then the shadow root within here, but your query selectors and all that fun stuff still apply. So then it clones the thing you would think of as a card, which is that container. And instead of appending it there, we want to append it to a different container, right? So we're going to actually do shadow root query selector cards. Right now we have to wire up the button, and this is way easier. So I can do @click. Now this is a lit convention. It's not vanilla JavaScript, but I'll let it slide because it's very easy to follow what that does. So when we wire something up, we can do event listeners in this way. Now I could do like mouse down and like all kind of other event hit. Like I'm just putting @click because it's literally listening for a click. Now you could write that a different way. There's someone in class had on mount in their view code. Okay, and mounted objects is when we have this tag, right? And you're writing the definition of a tag, and then the tag is going to be placed on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, but when the application goes to run, right, like when you load the web page, technically the tag is there, but the definition has not been applied yet. Okay, just for like a little tiny second, right? Like, because if you don't supply the definition, this is hilarious. It wants to write all this code for me, which is actually sort of what I wanted it to do. It's kind of weird. Sure, yeah, write all the code. That is sort of what I wanted it to do. But anyway, so there's a moment in between there, like the page is loading, and like divs just are divs. Okay, but you made some custom tag.
Yeah.
Okay, that definition is loaded via JavaScript. So the DOM is loading. Technically, JavaScript loads after. So it's like the whole page loads. Hey, here's this thing. It's just there. It's treated like a div by the browser. Then the definition comes in, and it's called hydration. It hydrates that definition, and now suddenly it's not a div anymore. It's all of this web component. Okay, right. So that act is typically called mounting. Like it's mounted to the page.
So is that bad?
No, I'm just saying there's a life cycle that you can't access things inside your own element in the constructor because that is such a low level construct. Okay.
So should I change it?
No, you're not changing anything. I'm just providing context here. Okay. So as a result, I can't write this.shadowroot.query. I can't write that yet. Because technically in this part of the life cycle, the element itself doesn't exist. It's just a abstracted class definition.
So cascading matters here. Like where you put things matter.
Yes. Yeah. So there's life cycle hooks in this as far as when it mounts. So in Vue, it was called like on mount. In lit, it's called first updated. Technically, in vanilla JavaScript web components, it's called connected callback. That means now we're on the page, you can run stuff assuming we exist. Okay? We're not going to use that one just for this example. We're going to use first updated. This implies the element is already and it's just about to get rendered and be hydrated with our definition. All right? So now in that moment, I can start doing query selectors for all this different stuff. And you see here, it's ridiculous that it just wrote this. Like, literally the thing I was going to show. So change the card color, right? I could do @click and then have some function that runs, right?
Yeah.
Or I do a query selector at first updated because it exists. I can store a reference. So this is a reference to that button, right? Okay. Then I can add an event listener. And when you click on the thing, it modifies the styles of the card container, which here it says is .card container. I don't know if it's pulling this code from something else you wrote. Like if you pasted your...
I think I pasted my Java.
Yeah, I don't know why it knew that. Like this is trippy. Similar. It's trippy that it knew this, right? But so I'm laying this out because these are two different ways to achieve the exact same thing, right? You're adding an event listener. This way up here is vanilla.
Which way is the hard way?
The vanilla way is a lot more writing. Now it's also not stateful because we've got color button, right? So whenever we click the change the color, okay, this is literally just setting it to this value. Yeah. So
you get my random color generator.
Right, so you need the random color generator. You could do that. Now the other way you could do that though is I would probably do like random color generator, and this is a fun autocomplete because I guarantee it'll know what to do. Okay. So
Yeah.
give me a random color. The reason we would put that method on the whole object instead of just an anonymous function, because that's what this is, right?
Yeah.
Anonymous function is this is now stateful. Okay, if it's clicking, the user has to interact with it to modify the color.
Yeah.
Okay, but if the user clicks and we run a method to modify the color, that means other things unrelated to the user could modify the color. Haven't shown any code yet. Okay, so instead, when we click, we're going to just call this dot random color generator, right? You get that?
Yeah.
That relationship. Okay, so when I click on that color button, that should work. Right, so we can solder dependencies. Let's see, we're gonna start. Let's see what happens. It might not work. Well, it's at least there. All right, so let's call it console. We've got an initial. No, I don't have any error. That's because I'm running Screencastify. It's my software, so I ignore those messages. But all right, so clone, which I wrote before. All right, so clone largely works.
Yeah.
Okay, and then change card color does not appear to work with what it has currently. Now change card color should do this random color generator.
And my toggle description is done differently. Will that? So my toggle description is done in the index.html.
Yeah, how'd you do that?
Well, I did it without it.
So look, when I hit change card color, right, it does change the card color, but you'll notice I didn't actually do anything with this value. I just said, hey, run this method. So it did work. I just need to do something with this method in this case, right? So card container is actually that. So down in here, we're going to randomly generate a color and then we're going to assign it just like before. Equal, oh, I want to do complete it correctly. And then I'll still return the color in case, like, you know, someone would want to know what the color was. But random color generator. Okay, let's see if that worked. Cannot read properties of null reading query selector. So what do we got here? We've got yeah, okay. Let's see if this fixes it before I say. So this is another subtle reason between, right? So we have effectively two identical ways of achieving the same thing, right? With this click and it runs this. Now here's the alternative. Right? Instead of all that query selector, this dot. And then I can get rid of this up here. Now, the difference is, right, that was vanilla.
Yeah.
But you notice I had to do this like additional BS, right? I had to do that. That's because you're setting an event listener to something internal to this object. But the object then, when you click for the event, it doesn't know what this is anymore, if that makes sense. So like this is us, right?
Right.
But now I set an event listener that says, hey, when you click on something, run this function.
Oh.
So that initial binding is fine. But then when the function actually goes to run, calls to this, is sort of like an anonymous function. There's no idea why that just happened.
Right.
So that is, and that starts to get into the weeds of like, holy crap, vanilla JavaScript is
So
confusing.
if you use this more than once, would it?
You'd have to know what the like, you start to get into like, well, what is this at that point in the operation? Now, the other interesting thing you could do there is you can bind, so that the dot bind is saying run this function, but this context is binded to whatever's passed in. So you could actually pass something else in and assume that that is now the thing that is this.
Yeah.
That gets ridiculously confusing. So I wouldn't recommend doing that, right? So generally the way we end up building these is this type of relationship here, right? Like random color generator, make the method, at click, right? And so that way you just have a nice logical, I'm looking through, okay, when they click on the color button. And the other nice thing, you don't need like IDs on these, right? So like it simplifies what you write when you're doing this. Technically, every event has a E, just for it doesn't mean anything in this instance, but it has an E. What are you complaining about? Oh, because I still have that color button thing from above, but I got rid of color button. There we go. All right. So I click that. The E, or like thing that you're immediately given, is the event. Right. So in this case, it's the act of clicking, which can tell you all kind. This is the altitude angle of the cursor when I touch the button. Like, you can get into some ridiculous detail. You don't need any of that, right? Where on the screen were you when you clicked the button? It tells you the exact, like, every possible piece of detail you would want to know about this, right? Like tilt. There's no such thing as tilt with the mount, right? Like, I'm not doing this. However, there are three-dimensional input devices, like a Wiimote, right, that technically could point, right? So there's a television and I point and then I click. You could obtain the twist of the remote. Like, I mean, we're in that level of geometry and weeds with data. But some of the big ones is that E dot detail, which this one doesn't have detail. No, E dot detail is commonly used to send data back and forth, because you can make up your own events to do whatever you want. But target is the more, one of these things we care about, right? It's what was clicked on. So the target is the whole Penn State card, technically speaking.
Well, isn't that kind of what we want?
It is. I'm just telling you that, like, this information is sort of hidden there.
That shows you.
So.
Well, didn't you add like a log thing to like log that information?
Yeah, I did. You can do console.log.
And all that does is show you.
Just print. Yeah, console.log will just print that. You can do console.warn or console.error. Yeah. They don't do anything different, but it does give you different output. See how that's a warning now?
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop the execution, but like, if you're writing code and you go, if they somehow got to this thing, there's some error on my part, right? So you can make these test cases where you're like, they shouldn't be able to get here.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be able to get here, but maybe it means, the server didn't respond fast enough or something like that. So then you can set that flag so that when you look at it, you go, oh crap, there was an error here or something, right? And sort of backtrace where that came from. So I only do those two. Oh, never mind. It made title and part of delete last where
it clones two of them.
Yeah, I'm not gonna fix all of your silly business.
And you're able to you can delete every card.
It can delete every card. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna leave that stuff as it is. You get to be the guinea pig in class, and then I'm going to take this material. All right, I'm gonna go get status, get add, tag, get amp, recording right before class, get push. Right, so that gets up there. And now it's at the correct hierarchy level. But then what I need to do is
title.
What
component one probably isn't.
It's a horrible title. Like, I'm not changing it. That's on you to have to type that silliness all the time. But I'm going to create a pull request back to your main thing. Added minor support for click events on buttons for 1x revision. And I say 1x because this is not correct, like what we're doing. But it is correct. You're trying to make it just work.
Yeah.
Right? But architecturally, semantically, I should say, you have a PSU-button or PSU card or whatever, right? Why does a card have buttons inside of it?
Because Dakota's buttons.
Yes, exactly. But that doesn't make any sense.
No.
It should just be the card. And then something else should be controlling the card.
So all the buttons should be outside of the card?
Yes, because otherwise, if I add 10 cards to the page, I get all these other miscellaneous buttons, right? So scoping is really important because we're working in a scoped context here to go, oh, well, these buttons are just contextually in my head for demonstrative purposes. So maybe I'll put them in the demo. And then I'll write JavaScript that's still global for them, like in the index HTML, but I'll access things down in the card. It also dramatically simplifies your selectors so that if you have that outside of the card, then you go, well, just query select PSU-card and make another one. So I cheated. I showed you, I told you what we're